I'm Jen Perks. I am an HD family member. I'm currently the chapter president of the Arizona chapter, and I'm also a captain with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. So kind of all of these worlds are colliding, and I have more experience in law enforcement than I do in Huntington's disease. I'll just kind of start where my Huntington's story starts. You know, in 2018 is probably the first time I had learned about Huntington's disease from a high school friend that's also the medical director of the Center of Excellence in Nebraska, and I was just floored. Like, how can this possibly be a thing? Probably 2 to 3 months later, I learned that my sister, who was adopted when she was 13 days old, was at risk for Huntington's disease. And it came really, really real. You know, she's 31 years old, has 4 children, and wanted to get tested. She tested gene positive a few months later, and I'm all in. You know, it was February of 2019 when we got those results, sitting in the genetic counselor's office, and I'm sure you guys have been there or have some version of that story with yourself or a loved one. And then, you know, I came back and I just had to get involved. You know, I started looking for how I can contribute, what resources were available. And in October of 2019, I was sitting in it was a Help for HD conference, and it was a session on law enforcement. And it was one of those videos that I'm not gonna show you, but those ones that just punch you in the gut. You never wanna see your loved one treated in that way. As a law enforcement leader, I don't want to see my employees acting in that way without any ability to see through towards a solution, instead of are just so in the moment and in whatever's happening and can't progress beyond that. It was absolutely heart-wrenching to me, and I had to really sit back and think, like, how do I combine these two roles? Because I'll just be really honest with you as far as how I deal with use of force incidents. Again, I'm on the detention side. I supervise a lot of law enforcement, but I've never conducted a traffic stop or anything like that. But when I look at a use of force, I think it's really important what the officer on the scene sees, feels, hears, knows. Those are important things, almost more important than what any of us just see on a video. But I also believe that even if we can say something was justified or if something was legal, there's opportunities to do better in most cases. So that's kind of where the worlds are kind of sitting with me right now. I feel that, you know, training and accountability is really important, and I've come back to my agency and I've tried to bring elements of that in. But I don't have any formal training program right now, but the training academy that I'm the commander of, we train probably 35 agencies throughout the state of Arizona, so I feel like that gives me a lot of a power to empower people, and that's really what I want to do here. You know, I don't want to tell you how you should engage. I think you should be authentically yourself, and we need to learn how to do better. You know, so I want to empower you to understand how to help yourselves, but also hopefully give you a little bit of hope that there's those of us out there trying to shift our culture and make it better for everybody. So I guess I should get through some of these disclaimers. So in addition to this just being an educational session, I want to be clear that I'm here speaking authentically as me, Jen Perks. I'm not speaking as a representative of HDSA or Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, but I think there's some value in all of those experiences that we can share. I've already told you I'm not a law enforcement officer, but I oversee their training and supervision for a lot of them, so I do have influence in that space. Not an expert in constitutional law, but I think that's something we should talk about a little bit as far as, you know, you have rights, you know, and you should understand what those are in the areas that you live, so you're doing what's best for you and your family members and not just submitting to authority because you think that's the safest. you know. So those are hard things to juggle, but I think they're important conversations to have. No, going up took me right out of the slideshow again. So no relationships to disclose. I think this just kind of emphasizes what I've already said. You know, we have to understand that we're coming from different places, but even though there may be some outliers out there that don't have the same perspective, don't have the same trust, value, respect for other people's rights, and don't understand how to engage in the best ways, this is all that we want to do from both sides of the house, is communicate effectively so we can, you know, work together. Our job is to serve the communities. So I have a very short video of the academy that I run, just
Maricopa
maybe
County
initiate
Law
some
Enforcement Training
conversation.
Academy. We pride ourselves in being the finest law enforcement training academy serving agencies throughout the state. During the academy, you will be tested both physically and academically. Your success depends on how much time and effort you put in. Our training staff and instructors will share with you knowledge they have gained in their countless years of service. They will prepare you for a successful start to your law enforcement career. Whether you're attending our 12-week detention academy or our 24-week sworn academy, your success depends on your dedication and effort. Work as a team, push each other, and remember, all of our badges are earned, not given. And if you're driven enough to earn a badge, you will embark on one of the most rewarding careers in the U.S. Thank you very much for considering a career in law enforcement. Best of luck in your new journey.
Before I share my thoughts, are there any, you know, thoughts about the video, about how we're promoting the role at this point? No. I think what we're trying to do is make a shift from this command and control, not that you're going to get this badge and this gun and you're going to be in charge. It's truly a career of service, and that's what we're trying to communicate, and that's what's
Maricopa
important
County.
to us. So to kind of show how that change is happening, I think it's kind of interesting to recognize that whether you look at the HDSA law enforcement training or if you look at the International Association of Chiefs of Police, we're really saying the same thing. You know, there's documented instances of law enforcement having issues with people with Huntington's disease. Law enforcement is saying we need to empower ourselves and get this knowledge so we can decrease these instances and make it better for the community that we serve. So it's not a you have a responsibility or, you know, somebody did something right or wrong. It's we have to do this because it's imperative for the success of all of us. So just like I said, I just want to empower you with a couple ideas. There's no way you should engage because I can't tell you what those engagements will look like. There's so many different pathways into the criminal justice system, interactions into law enforcement. I think the HDSA My Crisis template is a really good starting point. I put the QR code right on top of that, and that'll give you guys the PDF to go right into that. And then one of the other things that we often recommend to some of the other communities we work with is going onto your phone and adding that emergency contact or any medical information that you would like to have readily available to your home lock screen. That way, if communication is an obstacle for you or, you know, stress or whatever that is, and you can't quite engage verbally, then you have that information there to assist yourself and assist the officer. And then, of course, there's all the other options that we talk about as far as the medical jewelry, but if that's not comfortable, there's, you know, the smart IDs, which is a card you can put in your wallet or whatever works for you. Oops, sorry, I went pretty. So before I get into this video, I think there's a lot of other opportunities you can take. I know, HDSA has the social workers, which are a tremendous resource. We invited a defense attorney that does have experience with Huntington's patients into one of our support groups to speak to what their rights are and how they can engage and what the laws are in Arizona. There's some pretty stringent DUI laws in Arizona where, although you have the right to refuse field testing and you have the right to wait till they get a warrant for blood and things like that, there's still implications for your license and things like that. So taking the time to explain those things, giving people just the information that you don't have to let an officer search your vehicle. You don't have to let them do a full search of your person in limited circumstances. I think it made people feel a little bit hopeful. A lot of the people in the room were individuals who had been approached and questions based on behaviors or movements and things outside their control. And empowering with them, embracing someone like that into our community that says, I know it's a long road through this court process, but I can help you, was valuable. Other things, like I said, I come from the detention side. Before I got to the training academy, I was a jail commander. Often the social worker, not often, but when it happened, would call me and say, how do I navigate this court system, And they're often willing to write a letter to the court or talk to your attorney and share a little bit about Huntington's disease, so that's something that can be considered during your case. As far as if somebody's incarcerated, completely without me knowing who the person is, I can provide them with the clinical liaison that can pretty much take in information. Because of HIPAA laws, they're not really going to be able to communicate with you if you're the caregiver and say, we got them their medication, we're able to do these accommodations. But jails and prisons, we're required to follow ADA laws. So if there are accommodations that are necessary, or if there are medications that you're on, just calling and giving that information to the medical providers in the jail or prison system can be very beneficial, because there's doctors there that can confirm those prescriptions and be helpful in those ways. And I don't know that a lot of people know that. And then just moving in to this next section is, I feel like it's our responsibility to create opportunities for positive interactions. We shouldn't be sitting back and waiting for something to happen and hope that it goes well. Thinking we did enough training in mental health and patience and communication and all of those soft skills that we're getting a lot better at, but we're still probably not experts. It's important to find ways to go in, for us as law enforcement, to go into the communities and work with them. And we've started a program where we work with what's called First Place. It's a residential program in Phoenix for people with autism, and we've done several trainings with them. We call them training, but it really is just a fun day where we either go to their home and do what we call in the academy field problems, just run through some scenarios. So we have people sitting in the front seat watching a traffic stop take place. Demonstrations with some of the funner things we get to do, as far as maybe the canines or helicopter, the horses. We'll bring everything out. So we're just friendly people that we can answer questions, and hopefully when there's a serious type of interaction, there's been some trust established and they know what questions to ask, and they know how to advocate for themselves a little bit better. And we see sometimes the same residents come back over and over. We've also brought them into our training academy. And the next session we're going to do is going to be some training, but not for the residents. It's going to be for our employees. It's go through these interactions with these people, learn from these people. What we don't do well in law enforcement is listen and take the time to hear people, slow down in our communications, build up those skills, and for us too, in this safe environment. And then we're going to go inside and listen from the experts that work with these people in these different programs so we can get better. Is it specifically the HD community? Absolutely not. But it is the same skill set that we're building, and I think it can be emulated in other places. It's just finding that connection with one organization or one community outreach officer that's willing to help. These are the things that more and more you're seeing law enforcement agencies doing, because we truly are here to serve the community, and part of that service means being there for the needs of the people when it's not an emergency. So go ahead and play the video.
Ken Booker, Deputy Chief of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. What we're doing is we're building relationships with our community. Today, our community members happen to be from the autistic community, and we're taking time to really have positive interactions and them getting to know us getting to know them learning from us about what we do as law enforcement, and us learning from them on how to respond if we come in contact with a member of our community that happens to have autism.
His stuff, give him a copy of the warning, and we're going to send them on their way. Have your hands kind of in the open so they don't know you're sticking your hands in your pocket or maybe reaching for something respectful to them. They'll let us know the situation, and then you'll kind of see they typically ask for a driver's license and registration for the vehicle. And it's the individual that got pulled over, they're going to look over everything.
So this is our third training that we've done with MCSO, and really the intent of today's training is exposure, both for law enforcement and for our neurodiverse residents. This is that opportunity to practice, to get that exposure for both neurodiverse individuals and law enforcement.
I think something that's really special and important about these types of opportunities is from the law enforcement side that we have buy-in from all levels. So we have line staff in there talking to the people and, going through the scenarios and answering questions, because, in those couple seconds where you saw people standing around, there was a lot of, what if this happens? What if I'm on the bus without my ID? What if this? What if that? And they're able to answer those questions in that moment. And it goes all the way up. You saw sergeants with sergeant stripes on, all the way up to the sheriff. So in order to shift a culture in this way, you need buy-in from the entire organization, and that really just shift in the mindset of, we're here to serve the community, and that means finding out who the people in our community are and meeting them where they're at based on their needs, being available to answer questions, and being a resource. So really that's, in a nutshell, what I had for you, and I just wanted to hear from you, like, what are your questions? What are your concerns? What are your fears that I can maybe help navigate? And like Derek said, we have another expert in the room, or maybe more of an expert in the room, that can help discuss more of the criminal justice system. Yes, ma'am.
Are there, and I'm sure there are, hi, Derek, I'm Teeny. Yeah, nice to meet you. Is there pamphlets that can be ordered to give to law enforcement that HDSA has? And I was kind of a little disappointed that there isn't a kiosk out there dealing just with law enforcement. So I guess I'm thinking about my little town. Is there pamphlets I can order to give to them so that they can look it up?
Teeny, I love you. You get me involved. I'll take this one. But yes, we do have specific pamphlets that you can go drop off at your precinct. I know I have a few of the caregivers ones with me. So after the session, please, I'll go grab them and bring them in so that they can be available. Also, we do have our mission table that has some of the materials for talking to law enforcement as well. But reach out to me directly at HDSA. I work with the publications. I'm happy to send copies out.
Yeah. And I think it would be important too, I think that's a great idea to have a booth out there and, perhaps in the future, we can do a joint session to bring in wherever we are, some local law enforcement to hear the conversation and then hear from you guys as well.
Just, if I could just briefly. So I'm Danny Gimbel. I'm a prosecutor in Palm Beach County, Florida. My dad passed away from HD 11 years ago, and I'm at risk. And so, and where we would get to someone, and again, I'm not speaking in an official capacity as a prosecutor, but generally speaking, where you have the interactions with law enforcement, and then if it goes badly and an arrest is made, then the next level it comes to is your district attorney, your state attorney's office, and the interactions with that. And so hopefully I can be able to answer any of your questions about anything as far as the process and how any of that goes.
Right up front.
Hi, thank you. My name is Drew. So I'm just curious about how robust is the training, in Maricopa County, for example, for police interaction with individuals with disability, and then what's the variability from county to county, state to state? And I guess I'm asking this, I'm thinking about my father and his ability to follow instructions cognitively and then also physically being able to do that. Is this something that, or I guess just what are your perspectives on that sort of training?
It varies state to state. Each state has their own licensing or certification board for law enforcement officers. So in the state of Arizona, it wouldn't vary county to county as far as the hours that are being required to be trained and the topics and things like that. But organizational commitment does matter, right? And the quality of presentation does matter. So even if Maricopa County says this is important and we have the most robust training materials, one thing we've implemented into our academy is not just death by PowerPoint. We want to bring people into situations because it's important to stress those recruits out in that moment so they can see how they're going to react, and because force is a relevant topic too, not just dealing with the mentally ill. One of the changes that I'm really proud of is we don't just go into what we used to call the red man scenarios when they kind of have to fight for their lives, figuratively, and leave them in that heightened stage. I require them to do some de-escalation because they may be in a very violent interaction, but they may need to get in their vehicle and go help somebody. And they need to know how to self-regulate and do that. So that's a little bit more than what you're asking, but it does vary state to state. There's requirements based on the state. All of those topics are trained, but it depends on the organizational commitment. I know we have a post-academy where we also bring in special populations to talk to these newer officers so they can hear some of the stories and have that already in their minds when they go out on their field training program.
Are other people reaching out to you kind of as a model organization or, practice? That sounds really good.
I'm laughing because that's not a question we get in Maricopa County a lot in a positive way. But yeah, we have a lot of good relationships and we share the information and then we go to other places and say, what are you doing? Because, all of us are trying to figure out how to come out of what we created, right? We want to get better. We were all here various times in history and specifically in 2020 when some things went wrong. It's our job, speaking from a law enforcement perspective or leader, to fix that, and we're working together to try and do that. So that first place is something that I've shared I've spoke at a few conferences nationally and kind of role modeled that and taken some things that others are doing to role model as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a social worker here in Idaho, and I'm really excited about this specific topic because it's something I deal with a lot. So really quickly, because I'm all about resources, the toolkit for law enforcement training is also available by PDF on HDSA's website. So is that, oh, you have the, okay, and he also has some hard copies over here, but there's actually a law enforcement training that is available for specifically law enforcement. So my question to you is I'm currently trying to negotiate with a couple of different agencies down where I live in southern Idaho so I can get in to give this training, and I'm coming against some roadblocks. We have all this information, I can send it to them, but I want to actually go and talk and try to develop these relationships. And I love the language you used about a model organization, because it does seem like you do have a lot of buy-in and interest. So for trying to create these places elsewhere, do you have any recommendations, or can you speak to those of us who are trying to get the education, trying to implement options for people with disabilities, specifically HD in this case? But I would love for you to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I would say you're definitely not alone in that, and even being in the industry, sometimes we struggle because you go into these law enforcement sites and it takes you a while to find the right person. But I would be happy to connect and talk about your barriers specifically and see if I can help navigate those in any way. Sometimes it's just getting the right person, and it's once you have the right person's ear, and maybe it's not exactly what you envision, but you can collaborate and do something joint. Maybe start with we have an online training platform that we'll use sometimes when we don't have like classroom space or capacity. So, I don't think it's a secret that we're struggling with staffing and things like that, and we have to use some of those creative solutions in order to bolster our training at this point. So, but I don't know. One thing I always say is I make people tell me no twice, so I just keep going back. But, sometimes you hear no over and over, and it's like, well, who do I ask? I think it's speaking to what it looks like where you live, because where we are, we have like the city agencies and the county agencies and state agencies, and just maybe keying into the right one. Community outreach officer, maybe a school resource officer, those people that have already showed commitment to the community might be your roadway in.
Okay, I think it's super important to me, and I just want to highlight this because I was working with a case in Idaho recently where I was actually able to connect with the chief, and I spoke to him on the phone, and in that conversation, he had no idea what HD was. And he's like, I've been in this position for 20 years, I've never heard of this. And we were dealing with some really serious safety issues, and the family just didn't feel like the department was listening to them or taking them seriously when he was trying to report these. And so that's why there's such an importance in getting this information out. And then also like, hey, we have all this stuff for you to learn about how to interact with somebody with HD. But it's hard to get that into the ears if the ears aren't listening.
I would go back to that chief, because you may not get to the officers right away, but if you can get into an executive meeting, wherever you are, there's chiefs meetings of whatever those different organizations look like. And if you can get a few of those chiefs to care and that becomes part of their passion project, then the officers will do the training, So I think that's your in. It may not be immediate, it may not be the first time you ask, but if you get to tell some of those compelling stories, because I do understand the concern as a family member and just as a community member that law enforcement does not get it right all the time, but I do believe most of us want to.
Okay, I'll keep trying. Thank you.
I work with the Washington State Department of Corrections here in Washington State, and I'm also a nursing. And I'm also an HD family member. I have watched my family go to jail, et cetera. So I've been the whole spectrum, and I've working with the Washington State Department of Corrections. I've been trying to work with them and get them trained to understand what HD is, because I do see patients, my patient population in the corrections facility. I'm also the medical side of it. It's really important that we get the training done, because it matters how we cuff patients, it matters how we do things, because the following risk how we bunk them, the medications that they get. It matters. Their food intake, everything matters. I'm not the judge and jury. I just want to make sure that they get the care that they need, as I don't care. That's all I care about, is that they get what they need and everything else will fall into place. And I've been they've been very receptive here in Washington State, which I've been very blessed with that, because they're really getting open-minded about it now. And so I'm starting to see that they're making sure that the patients, if they know they have HD, they're getting the correct housing, they're putting where they need to be. So I've got to hand it to them. They're finally opening up to this, and so they know they have HD, they're moving fast. They're getting where they need to be. So they kind of become, sometimes it takes like, oh, they have HD, but it's training the officers, make sure they know how to cuff them. They're not resisting you. Their chorea, their movements, you can't cuff them like that. You got to be careful, and it just, and how you talk to them. So it matters. And so again, thank you for coming here and speaking on this topic, because it's really, really critical. It's critical.
No, thank you. It sounds like you're a champion for change where you're at, and it's important.
Did I get this turn? Okay. I'm not sure that I actually have a question as much as I just wanted to comment. I'm also in the same position that you're in my chapter in Iowa, where we've taken this on as our mission for 2024, is to reach law enforcement as well as fire. And the HD Connect, if you're in a chapter that you can reach to your local chapter, HD Connect has the training on there, but we're working on getting it also to the different establishments. But you can go on Facebook and just ask who in law enforcement would be willing to talk to me, and people will start tagging people. And once you're called out, it's kind of hard not to help out. So that's one thing that we're working on. Another thing is those brochures that you had. When I received one of those, they also were handing out little cards that said, I have Huntington's disease, and you're supposed to put it with your driver's license, so that if you ever had to get out your ID, that was with you to give to them. I'd love to get that in the hands of everyone who has HD. And the other thing is, I don't know if this is true in every state, but in Iowa, you can go online, and I wish I knew what it was exactly, but you could call your local law enforcement agency, and you can put in there that you have Huntington's disease, and it's just the same thing as if you have a pet in your house. So if ever the police were called for your home or something happened, that's going to pop up in their system to where they know that you are a person who has Huntington's disease.
Thank you so much. I really like that Facebook idea. Didn't even think about it, and especially so many sheriff's offices were led by an elected official, and sometimes calling those people out gets some action.
Yeah, I'd had two questions, I guess. A question and a comment, probably.
Sure.
Okay, so I also agree that there has to be an adjustment with how things are done. Recently, we ran into an issue where the community level police department was kind of aware of HD. Not a lot of training. It all depends on who comes out to the home quite naturally that day. But we're running into more of a problem with state officers, where they aren't very receptive, I guess, to us. And I don't know if that's like a common thing. I mean, because we have state troopers and then we have city cops, where city cops are a little bit more community-based versus the state troopers. And we've been trying to work with them to try to get, some type of education to them. It's been very difficult. I don't know if you have any pointers. Like I said, we've been trying with the whole reaching out to Facebook, calling, because I tend to be a stalker when I'm like looking to do something. But it's just been very difficult, and it just the lack of education really does impact my patients, because they don't understand the chorea or even some of the psychiatric that may come out, that it's not necessarily psychotic, but it's like they're obviously dealing with something, and you're only looking at it from a mental health side versus also a medical condition side. And it kind of resulted in quite naturally an explosion, because you have somebody who has no education, and then a patient who's very agitated and trying to, communicate what's going on, but a cop who's only seeing it one way, which kind of resulted in, a whole situation. So it's frustrating. So it's like we've tried to get that education out, and yeah, I just wanted to know if possibly any ideas, or if you guys run into like state troopers versus community cops. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we all have our own organizational culture and we think we're the law enforcement standard, but I think it's the same thing I said earlier. I find those champions that are already in the community, and maybe it's not doing the connection on Facebook, but it's like, what events are they going to? Do they do coffee with the cop? Do they do tip a cop? Do they do any of these community events? Because it's a lot harder to say no when you show up and you're in their face and be like, hey, you're here to help us? Cool, I got a really good idea, So maybe if they do any of that community engagement, find those events, find the people that go to those events, and those might be the people that give you the pathway in. So.
Hi, okay. I have 3 topics.
Okay.
The first one, we almost need to put a tattoo on our forehead saying we have Huntington's, because my sister got arrested, but she didn't want to tell the man she had Huntington's, so she had to stay overnight in jail, and that happens a lot. So the police are trying to do the right thing, but we're not helping them. But if we have stickers on the car, then maybe on the side of the car, then even like that little sticker with the barcode you could put on the car. That way when the police walks up, he could look at that. And then the other thing, you had mentioned if you're the disability rule that the people have to follow. So there's a guy, he's 25 years old, he got arrested in Florida for breaking and entering, and he was on the bed and sleeping in their house and eating their food, and he had a knife in his pocket. So then they arrested him for aggravated assault, 25-year-old boy. While he was in jail, he got tested for Huntington's by the Quest, the lab. He's still in jail. He has no drugs. He's on nothing. And so you said that disability, the thing that they have to follow, what's that called?
The American Disabilities Act.
Yeah.
So it's a federal.
So that's the thing everybody has to follow, right? Yeah. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
I'm also not a disability attorney, but what I will say, we are required within jail and prison facilities to have an ADA representative and do a certain amount of training. So there should be, either through the corrections detention side or the clinical side, a liaison. So I'm not, I don't have a lot of interaction or familiarity with the Florida system. I can't even think of people that I've networked with in some of my other trainings, but it should be at a minimum if they need accommodations. Because I mean, the question about the bunks and things that was brought up earlier, those should all be medical decisions. If it's a medical necessity, the corrections officers shouldn't have a say in that.
And just to quickly interject, there are a few more disability-specific sessions that are happening. I think there's one more today, and there's definitely 2 more tomorrow. But anything you see with Allison Bartlett's name on it, she will definitely be able to give you a more of a digestible view of how to look at disability rights.
I actually did a presentation in one of our towns and about Huntington's with the police, with the social worker, an HDSA social worker. But one of the things I found and told them about is on it, like on the iPhone, for example, there's the medical ID, and I told them, it's on the phone, and you can go there and know that someone has Huntington's because I put it in here. So I did let them know that. So it's one thing to lose because it is on your phone.
That's wonderful. I'm glad you're using it.
What's that? Okay, there's my contribution.
Thank you.
So just I guess two things. In terms of interaction, again, because if it gets to me because it went badly, and so two situations come to mind. One, DUI cases, and two, battery cases. And as Karen said, with DUI cases, unfortunately, a lot of the chorea simulates intoxication, and so certainly, the officer, the officer is coming into a high pressure situation where seeing somebody who is acting in some ways that would indicate intoxication, and so part of that is yes, I mean having an ID, so something saying I have HD would go to that, because unfortunately, absent that, the officer is going to go off the information that they have, and that's likely going to wind up in an arrest, and with then spending a night in jail, which is not a good outcome. And so it's providing the information to avoid the arrest, and I think that's what I think is the best thing, is if we can avoid these arrests from happening, because then you're creating these high stress environments, and so then that leads into the batteries. And I will say, outside of HD, in Florida we have something called the Baker Act. If someone can be civilly committed if they're a threat to themselves or others, and we get a number of cases where someone is in a mental episode and they hit an officer who comes and responds, and that person is likely going to get arrested and be charged with battery on a law enforcement officer, which is a felony. And so I think part of that then goes into the training, because battery is defined as the intentional touching of another against their will. And so that is why education is important, because a involuntary movement is not an intentional strike. And so I think for when these situations come in, and if you're a social worker and you need to call in because it requires some law enforcement intervention, it is to make clear that this person has involuntary movements. So then that way, if they do get hit, you're getting out that it is a battery that's occurring because it's not an intentional movement. And so it's part about getting that expressed to make it so that it is something that doesn't need to be a criminal matter, to avoiding it from becoming a criminal matter. Yes. Okay, so here's the process how it works. Once an arrest is made, then it's referred over to the state attorney, district attorney for filing. And so that would be something that if that comes to us, it's like, okay, it's battery on a law enforcement officer. And then if you're reading through and it says, oh, that this person was identified as having Huntington's disease and there are involuntary movements, then the question is, for me as a prosecutor, can I prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this was an intentional strike? And and those are the things that you're dealing with and yes, I mean, there are course corrections that are made where there are arrests are made, and then when the district attorney is reviewing it, they determine that it doesn't meet the criteria for an arrest. And I mean, and a lot of the times that'll happen with that, it's through the defense attorney. Once someone's arrested and when a filing decision is being determined, it's the defense attorney who then brings it to the attention of the state attorney, is like, hey, there's this issue that you ought to consider in terms of whether to bring charges or not. And so there are various kind of off-ramps to for it to avoid escalating, but part of that is communicating with it. So, like I'll say, the issue with Karen's sister is that had she identified that she had Huntington's disease, she may well never have been arrested that night.
All right, we have time for 2 more questions back here. We have 10 minutes left, so I'm gonna hand it over and then I'll get us closed out.
So what about in the case where it's a domestic violence charge? Because I have a patient right now with that, and the wife tried to call the non-emergent line, and they sent the law enforcement out, and she tried to explain to him that he had Huntington's disease, and she really just needed de-escalation for her own safety. But because there was an actual physical altercation, they arrested him, and he's been arraigned. He's going to have a public defender. And so I hear your argument, with the assault thing. So what about with a domestic violence charge?
The problem with domestic just as and I don't know if this is I know this certainly applies in our jurisdiction. If someone's going to jail that night, if there's domestic, because what they're not going to do is go over there and then leave, and then someone gets killed that night. And so that's the, if that call, and I mean, I think that's just something for people to know. If you're calling the police and alleging that you were a victim of domestic violence, the defendant's going to jail that night. And I think that's, part of the thought in terms of making the call. And look, I would never tell anyone not to call the police if that's what it is. But in terms of what the effect of that is going to be, in a domestic violence case, like if you're alleging you were a victim of domestic battery, and those are the ones where you are going to be taken to jail, and you cannot be released on bond until first appearance the next morning. And because one of the things that goes through in domestic violence cases is that one of the conditions of release is a question about whether the victim wants to have contact with it. And those are the struggles we got to deal with as prosecutors. Is I have cases where you have someone who is a multiple time victim of domestic violence with the same perpetrator, and we call and she says, no, I want contact with him. And then I need to say to the judge, Your Honor, even though she wants contact, the state wants, is requesting no contact because he has shown that this is a pattern of behavior.
And that's
and maybe
the safety of the wife has been paramount for us too, because she feels like I need to be there no matter what. But it was really difficult for her to watch him go to jail. But it is what it is. So, but the public defender could at least bring Huntington's into the factor. Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's safe to do so, they could ask if there's like a mental health crisis team. So we have a team of like civilian responders.
Hi, yes. I think I'm the final question.
Yes.
So yeah, we were kind of thinking about when law enforcement could have possibly, entered our lives. Our dad has Huntington's, our aunt has Huntington's. And I think there's it's hard with driving, right? That there's not a specific moment where you get a diagnosis and then your license is revoked. It's kind of this, are they driving responsibly? Are they not? So there have been a few incidents in our family where, eventually, right now my dad doesn't have his license. Our aunt still does. She probably shouldn't. She got very upset one day, got in the car, drove off, right? So we're talking about these very specific split decision moments, right? So maybe someone's driving really recklessly and they get pulled over. And then you hear in the news, right, that these moments can turn really fatal very quickly. So of course there are these moments, where of course we want to avoid arrest, but I'm thinking specifically about, we're talking about the advice that we're giving today is, reach into your pocket, take out your phone. It takes one officer to perceive that as the person taking out a weapon. They're already driving recklessly and dangerously. We've already established that folks don't really know what Huntington's disease is. And, I'm just really trying to imagine myself in that moment. What is the recommendation, right? If taking out the phone could be perceived as something dangerous, and we know that many folks don't know what Huntington's is, and it is a split-second decision of what to share with the officer. What is the kind of the life-saving thing, I guess, in that moment to share?
That's hard because there's not one answer, because I can't speak for all officers. But I mean, if it's possible, to verbally communicate what's going to happen, and that's something you could walk your loved ones through, say, I need to get my phone, or I need to reach here and grab my phone, or I have a card in my wallet I want to show you. those are some interventions, but I think from all perspectives, like we all kind of feel that in our heart really heavy that that could be us in certain situations. So I think you continue to talk through it with your family and use your social work and your whoever your support system is to really figure that out for your family. But I think we can all visualize what you're going through. So thank you guys. I'll hang out for a little bit, but we have to cut the session. I really appreciate your support, your questions, the ideas that were shared here.